This is the room where D-Day almost didn't happen. Not because of Hitler, not because of the weather, but because of a phone call. At 4:15 in the morning on June 5th, 1944, the secure line from London rang in this room. On the other end was Winston Churchill, Prime Minister of Great Britain, the man who had stood alone against the Nazi Empire when the world thought Britain would fall. He was calling Supreme Commander Dwight D. Eisenhower, and he was about to ask Eisenhower to cancel the invasion of Europe. What Eisenhower said in the next 3 minutes would determine whether 150,000 men would sail into history or stand down for a delay that could lose the war. This is not the story you were taught in school. This is not the story of heroic unity and brotherhood. This is the story of what happens when two men who love each other have to choose between friendship and victory. To understand that phone call, we have to go back 6 months. November 1943, Tehran, Iran. The Big Three, Roosevelt, Stalin, and Churchill, met for the first time. Stalin had one demand. He had been screaming it for 2 years. Open a second front in France. Stop making my people die alone. Roosevelt agreed immediately. He promised Stalin, "We will invade France in May 1944. Churchill's blood ran cold. Winston Churchill had seen this movie before. In World War I, he had championed the Gallipoli campaign, an amphibious invasion of Turkey. It was supposed to knock the Ottomans out of the war and open a supply route to Russia. Instead, it became a slaughter. 44,000 Allied soldiers dead. Churchill was blamed. He was removed from the Admiralty. It haunted him for the rest of his life. And now Roosevelt and Stalin wanted him to do it again. Only this time, the beaches would be defended by the most fortified coastline in human history, Hitler's Atlantic Wall. Churchill looked at the plans for Operation Overlord, the code name for D-Day, and he saw Gallipoli multiplied by 10. He saw the English Channel turning red. So Churchill began to stall. He proposed alternatives: expand the Italian campaign, drive to Vienna, invade through the Balkans, link up with Yugoslav partisans, attack Norway, secure the Arctic convoys. Anything but France. Roosevelt saw through it. So did Stalin, and so did the man Roosevelt chose to command the invasion, General Dwight D. Eisenhower. Eisenhower was not a battlefield hero. He had never commanded troops in combat. He was a staff officer, a planner, a diplomat. But Roosevelt chose him for one reason: Eisenhower could manage egos. And in early 1944, he inherited the most dangerous ego in the Allied command, Winston Churchill. April 15, 1944. Eisenhower convened the final briefing for Overlord at St. Paul's School in London. Every detail was locked in. Date, June 5, 1944. Tides and moonlight aligned. Beaches, 5 landing zones across Normandy. Forces, 11,000 aircraft, 7,000 ships, 156,000 men in the first wave. King George VI attended. Churchill attended. So did every senior British commander. And at the end of the briefing, Churchill stood up. He didn't congratulate Eisenhower. He didn't wish the men luck. Instead, he said, "Gentlemen, I remain unconvinced that this is the correct course of action. The price in British blood will be catastrophic. I propose we delay the invasion to August, when we can add additional divisions from the Mediterranean." The room went silent. Eisenhower had been expecting this. Churchill had been whispering doubts for weeks. But now, 5 weeks before D-Day, the Prime Minister was proposing a 2-month delay. General Montgomery, the British ground commander, was furious. He stood up and said, "Prime Minister, with respect, we have prepared for June. The troops are ready.
The deception plan is working. If we delay, the Germans will discover our intent." Churchill waved him off. "Montgomery, you have never seen what I have seen. I will not send British boys into a death trap." Here's what Churchill knew that most people didn't. British intelligence estimated 10,000 Allied casualties on D-Day. Conservative estimates said 25% of the first wave wouldn't make it off the beaches, and Britain was running out of men. By 1944, Britain had been at war for 5 years. She had fought in North Africa, Greece, France, Norway, and Italy. Her manpower reserves were nearly exhausted. If D-Day failed, Britain couldn't rebuild the army. America could, the Soviet Union could, Britain could not. So Churchill made a counteroffer. Delay to August, use the time to bring 8 more divisions from Italy, land at the Pas de Calais, where the channel is narrower and air support stronger, and only proceed if we have absolute air superiority. Eisenhower sent an urgent cable to Roosevelt. Churchill is attempting to reopen strategic decisions already settled at Tehran. If this continues, Allied unity will collapse. Roosevelt sent a brutal reply to Churchill. "Winston, we gave Stalin our word. The invasion happens in June. I need you to stand down." But Churchill didn't stand down. He escalated. May 15, 1944, Churchill played his final card. He went to King George VI and proposed something extraordinary. "Your Majesty, I believe you and I should sail with the invasion fleet on D-Day. We should land with the first wave at Sword Beach." The king was intrigued. "Why, Winston?" "Because if we are there, Eisenhower cannot treat British lives as expendable, and if the operation is as dangerous as I believe, the king and the prime minister dying on the beaches will force a reckoning with this reckless American strategy." George VI was a cautious man. He had a stutter. He had never wanted to be king, but he was no coward. He agreed. Churchill and the king would land on D-Day. When Eisenhower found out, he was apoplectic. He immediately went to see Churchill at 10 Downing Street. No aides, no witnesses, just the two of them. What was said in that room stayed private for 30 years, but in 1974, Eisenhower's personal notes were declassified. Here's what he wrote. "I told Churchill that if he and the king insisted on this stunt, I would resign as Supreme Commander. I would return to Washington and tell Roosevelt and Marshall that the British had lost confidence in the operation. I would recommend the invasion be canceled indefinitely and that all future operations be conducted under sole American command." It was a bluff. Eisenhower couldn't actually resign, but Churchill didn't know that. What happened next was the first crack in their friendship. Churchill stood up, walked to the window, and said, "Ike, you are threatening me. I did not think you were the sort of man who threatens friends." Eisenhower replied, "And I did not think you were the sort of man who would sabotage an operation to prove a point." Silence. Then Churchill said, "I will not go on D-Day, but I will not stop warning you that this plan will fail." Eisenhower won the battle, but the war with Churchill was not over, because Churchill still had one more card to play, and he would play it at 4:15 in the morning on June 5th.
June 4th, 1944. The invasion fleet was already loading. 156,000 men were climbing into landing craft. Paratroopers were checking their parachutes. The largest armada in history was about to sail. And then the weather turned. Group Captain James Stagg, a quiet Scottish meteorologist, entered Southwick House with the worst possible news. A massive storm system was moving across the Atlantic. Winds of 30 miles per hour, 6-foot waves in the channel, cloud cover so thick that air support would be impossible.
If the invasion launched on June 5th as planned, the landing craft would capsize, the paratroopers would be scattered across France, the bombers couldn't see their targets. It would be a catastrophe. Eisenhower had a choice. Go anyway and risk disaster. Delay for 24 hours and pray the weather clears. Postpone for 2 weeks until the next alignment of tides and moon. But here's the nightmare. If he postponed for 2 weeks, the secret would leak. The Germans would discover the invasion point, and Stalin would accuse the West of betrayal. At 4:15 a.m. on June 5th, Eisenhower made the call. He postponed for 24 hours. The fleet already at sea was recalled. It was chaos. Thousands of seasick men were told to get off the boats and wait. The secret was hanging by a thread. And then the phone rang. It was Churchill. This is the moment. Churchill's voice came through the secure line. It was calm, too calm. "Ike, I've been informed you've postponed the operation." "Yes, Prime Minister, the weather made it impossible." "I see. And when do you plan to go?" "Tomorrow, June 6th. Stagg says there's a small weather window." Churchill paused. Then he said the words that nearly ended D-Day. "Ike, I've consulted with the British Chiefs of Staff. We believe the window is too narrow. We recommend you postpone for 2 weeks. I am formally requesting that you delay the invasion until June 19th. Eisenhower knew what this was. Churchill wasn't worried about the weather. He was using the storm as a justification to get what he had wanted all along, a delay. 2 more weeks to lobby Roosevelt, 2 more weeks to add divisions, 2 more weeks to maybe cancel the whole thing. If Eisenhower agreed, the momentum would be lost. This was the test, not the weather, not the Germans. This was the test of whether Eisenhower could say no to the man who had saved Western civilization. Here's what Eisenhower said, according to his memoirs and the recollections of the British liaison officer who was in the room. "Prime Minister, I understand your concerns, but I have to tell you something. If we delay until June 19th, we lose the war." Stalin interrupted. "That's absurd." Eisenhower cut him off. "Let me finish. Stalin will see a 2-week delay as proof we never intended to invade. He will make a separate peace with Hitler. Germany will move every panzer division west, and when we finally do land, it won't be against 50 divisions, it will be against 100. Churchill was silent. Eisenhower continued. "You are asking me to choose between British caution and Allied victory. I choose victory. I am going tomorrow. I would prefer to go with your blessing, but I will go without it if necessary." The silence stretched for 15 seconds. 15 seconds that felt like 15 years. Then Churchill said, "Ike, you are a stubborn bastard." "I learned from the best, Prime Minister." Churchill laughed, a short, bitter laugh. "Very well, I will not block you, but I want it on record that I oppose this decision. If it fails, history will judge you, not me." "I accept that. Good luck, General. God help those boys." Eisenhower hung up. He walked to the window and watched the rain. In 18 hours, the largest invasion in history would launch, and Churchill would spend the rest of the night praying it wouldn't become the largest disaster. The weather window was tiny. The waves were still rough. The clouds were still low. But Eisenhower had made his choice. At 6:30 a.m. on June 6, 1944, the first wave hit the beaches. Omaha Beach was exactly as bad as Churchill feared. The American 1st and 29th Infantry Divisions were pinned down. German machine guns tore through the landing craft. Bodies floated in the surf. Commanders radioed back, "We are being slaughtered. We need to evacuate. Churchill received the early reports from Omaha. The casualty estimates were catastrophic. He wrote in his diary, "I have prayed so hard in my life. I told Eisenhower this would happen. God forgive me if I was right." But then something unexpected happened. The other beaches were succeeding. Utah Beach, minimal casualties. The 4th Infantry Division pushed inland. Gold Beach, the British 50th Division broke through the Atlantic Wall. Juno Beach, the Canadians fought house to house through the coastal villages. Sword Beach, the British 3rd Division advanced towards Caen. Behind the beaches, the paratroopers of the 82nd and 101st Airborne were causing chaos. They cut phone lines, they captured bridges, they convinced the Germans the invasion was everywhere at once. And most importantly, the deception plan worked. Hitler believed the Normandy landings were a diversion. He held back the panzer divisions near Calais, waiting for the real invasion that would never come. By the end of D-Day, 156,000 Allied troops were ashore. Casualties, 4,414 confirmed dead. 4,414. It was terrible. It was heartbreaking, but it was half what Churchill feared, and it was a fraction of what would have died if the invasion had been delayed and the Germans had reinforced.
June 7th, 1944, the day after D-Day. Churchill, who had spent the night praying and pacing, made a decision. He boarded a British destroyer and sailed for Normandy. He didn't tell Eisenhower he was coming. Churchill landed at Gold Beach. He walked through the wreckage. He saw the destroyed bunkers. He saw the medics treating the wounded. He saw British soldiers digging foxholes in French soil. And then he found Eisenhower. Eisenhower was inspecting the 3rd Canadian Division when Churchill appeared, unannounced, walking across a field with his cane. Montgomery tried to intercept him. "Prime Minister, this area is not secure." Churchill waved him off. "Monty, shut up." He walked straight to Eisenhower. Eisenhower snapped to attention. "Mr. Prime Minister, I wasn't informed you were—" Churchill cut him off. "Ike, I came to apologize." Eisenhower blinked. "Sir?" "I doubted you. I fought you. I tried to stop this, and you were right." Eisenhower later wrote, "Churchill looked me in the eye, and for the first time since I had known him, he looked old. He said, 'I have spent this war trying to prevent another generation of British boys from dying in the mud. But you understood something I didn't. Sometimes you have to risk everything to win everything. I was wrong. You were right, and I will never doubt you again.'" Eisenhower replied, "Prime Minister, you weren't wrong to be cautious. You were wrong to think I didn't care about those boys as much as you do." Churchill smiled. "Then let's finish this war, shall we?" "Yes, sir, let's." In the Eisenhower Presidential Library in Abilene, Kansas, there's a letter on display. It's from Winston Churchill to Dwight Eisenhower, dated June 12, 1944. It reads, "My dear Ike, I have seen the beaches. I have seen the men. I have seen what you have accomplished. You have achieved what I thought impossible. I spent years trying to prevent this operation because I feared it would be Gallipoli again. But you have proven that courage, when combined with wisdom, can move mountains. You have saved Europe. You have vindicated the alliance, and you have taught an old bulldog that sometimes the young lion knows best. I will follow you to Berlin. Yours in friendship and gratitude, Winston." D-Day succeeded because two men who loved each other
were willing to fight each other. Churchill fought because he had seen the cost of failed invasions. Eisenhower fought because he understood the cost of waiting. And in the end, Churchill had the courage to admit he was wrong. When Eisenhower died in 1969, one of the pallbearers at his funeral was a frail 94-year-old Winston Churchill, who had come out of retirement to carry his friend one last time. He told a reporter, "I opposed him once. I was wrong. I will honor him forever." The phone call at 4:15 a.m. on June 5, 1944, almost canceled D-Day, but it didn't, because Eisenhower understood that sometimes friendship means saying no, and Churchill understood that sometimes wisdom means saying, "I was wrong." 80 years later, the beaches are quiet, the bunkers are ruins, the men are gone. But the lesson remains. The greatest leaders are not the ones who never doubt. They are the ones who doubt and choose to trust anyway. What would you have done? Would you have delayed for safety or launched into the storm? Let us know in the comments below.